So that phone call that came in just as we started the backpack show was, of course, my CEO and business partner, Randall, who, dials. And I said, he goes, "How you doing?" I'm like, "Great, except I'm pushing record on the backpack show." And he goes, "Oh, don't let me get in the way." And so we hung up.
I'm so excited about today.
Today's a great day. Who'd you bring to us, Kerry?
Seanan McGuire, the New York Times bestselling author of the Wayward Children series, the October Daye urban fantasy series, the InCryptid series, and yes, she has won awards. She also writes darker fiction as Mira Grant. She has like an alter ego.
Feed. I read Feed.
Written the first books that my kids are so excited about. They want to like keep listening to the audiobooks after we get home and get out of the car. So,
which is a big thing. I mean, they have those moments. They say it in NPR all the time. There's these moments where you sit in your driveway and don't go anywhere for a bit. And so if your kids are wanting to take the audiobook out of the car and into the house, that's a giant thing. So we're gonna have to ask Seanan McGuire how we get to that point. This is a big day today. See, my parents are here, my biological father and his wife by
you're
marriage.
Ridiculous. Your mother.
Right. Oh, my mother, also true. All right. We know what we should do.
Hi, everyone. Tim Kitzrow from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, welcoming you to The Backpack Show. Your hosts, Chris Brogan, Kerry Gorgone, Boom Shakalaka.
Backpack Show.
When I look at that opener, in addition to thinking about Tim Kitzrow, I can't help but look at Ryan Priest and remember he was sitting outside, like in the project car he was working on that had no AC, and that was a very hot day. So,
oh my gosh, that man sacrificed.
Mr. Bob.
Wow,
Collins.
Bob Collins, you are going to love getting a chance to meet Seanan McGuire today because we've got some great connection.
Did you want to thank any of our sponsors?
I thought I'd talk with some sponsors. I mean, hey, would you like an audio podcast?
Sure would.
If you do, you could use castos.com. They're like peas in a podcast. You could get a really good podcast from my friend, Matt Medeiros. And he's part of it. I don't know. Castos.com. You can get one.
It's easy to
use. Would you like a .online domain like the backpackshow.online? You can get one for a whole $1, $1 United States dollar. cbrogan.me/online. You just use the code Chris.
In all caps. I don't know why.
Right. Hey, do you ever want to make a show like this and make guests get up at 6 a.m?
Oh.
You could do it. You go to cbrogan.me/StreamYard. You can get your own StreamYard account.
Now listen, nobody makes Seanan McGuire do anything. I asked very nicely from a place of interest and curiosity, and she graciously agreed.
And she said yes in a moment of weakness.
Oh.
Hey, do you ever want to stick it to the man? If you don't like Google, you don't have to use Google. You can go to presearch.com. They will shower you with cryptocurrency.
If you remember to log in.
If you remember to log in. This is why I cannot have a Lamborghini.
I'd buy that for $1, says Bob Collins. Surprised that the podcast name stuck. NFTs are stupid. Thank you, Steve Garfield. And Peter McNally checking in from Scotland.
Wow. Right down the street practically.
From Scotland.
In Glasgow. So let's grab Seanan McGuire out here. Let's say hello. We can cover some of these details and make sure we understand what's going on.
Seanan says the cats make her do things all the time.
To be fair.
Yeah, it's basically their job. My favorite cheese shop in the world is in Glasgow. So good morning, Glasgow.
So exciting. One of our very favorite, well, two of our very favorite comedians, Janie Godley and Ashley Story, are over there. Janie's dealing with cancer right now. So love to Janie. Fan of hers. Thank you for joining us. I know that it's early. Thank you. Now, were you always a writer? Like when you were in school, were you writing poems and stories and things, or did that start later?
I don't actually remember the earliest stuff because, memory is very fuzzy before about the age of 6. But the apocryphal story within my family is that I started about the age of 3. And we do have papers that support that. So it looks like it's been a lifetime thing. I had the gloriously fortunate misfortune of having an aunt who was a child psychologist, and she had a theory, and I still don't know if her theory was correct or if it was delusional, that children just as a whole learn things are hard because the people around them tell them that they are hard, and that kids are capable of doing almost anything if they don't realize that it's supposed to be hard. So as I was getting ready to start kindergarten, Before anyone had given me expectations, she came to me and told me that kindergartners were expected to be able to write simple poetry. So she was going to teach me the simplest kind of poem there was. It was called a sonnet. And if you could count to 10, you could write a sonnet. So she had me writing structurally accurate Shakespearean sonnets at the age of 6. They were not good sonnets. I will stress that. Like they were technically accurate. They were 10 syllables, A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G, but they were about the things a 6-year-old cares about. So, I think we have a sonnet somewhere that is in honor of my day of the week underpants.
I miss those.
So not to put too fine a point on it, you were writing structurally accurate sonnets.
Yeah. But I still don't know whether that's actually hard, because if you talk to most 6-year-olds, they can count to 10 and they can do simple rhymes. Cat, bat, whatever.
My first poem in the 4th grade that had to be all one-syllable words was "Let the Cold Winds Blow."
Nice.
Steve Garfield says it's a cool thing that this live show is your Chris Brogan header on LinkedIn. Thanks, Steve. We didn't know that.
Like when you go to
Yeah,
LinkedIn.
I guess.
Oh,
I don't know.
that's new. Good for you.
So did you ever think, now we're at sonnets. Did you ever think in high school you might like to be a writer, or like in grade school? Was that your dream, or did you dream of something totally else?
In grade school, I pretty much was planning to either be a writer or the person who designed My Little Ponies. But then while I was in middle school, My Little Pony started becoming less popular, and so I had to pick different career aspirations. I went with just writer. And then for a little while in middle and high school, I was planning to go into musical theater as a profession. Um, and that did not work out, both because I'm not the world's best dancer and because I broke my spine in 3 places. So
How? Was it a My Little Pony related incident?
it was not. It was like many people, I have a very slight spinal curvature. And I was afraid of doing tumbling passes in gymnastics because they hurt my back. And we had a substitute gym teacher who said, you're being a coward," and basically flipped me over. And it turned out that I was afraid of those flips because I could feel the pressure on my spine. And when she flipped me, it broke things.
Oh my God. Wow.
Mhm.
So where'd she
the
end
good
up?
old days
Skid
in
Row?
school.
Yeah, right.
I don't know where she wound up. She was no longer working for our school system, though.
Well, I guess that's a good thing.
So you're writing, I mean, sonnets at 6. You get into the My Little Pony world, and I think that people really discount the power of fandom as getting someone into the writing space. Do you accredit some of your success to that? I mean, there's people who have, of course, done it intensely so, but like, is fandom one of the on-ramps to you deciding to write the books the way you're writing them?
So I was a fanfic author for literally 15 years. That is how I learned to tell a long form story. It's how I learned to pace myself and not just vomit all the ideas onto page one. It's how I learned to take feedback and be edited. And it's also how I found my agent. She found my Buffy the Vampire Slayer porn and thought it was very nice. And so she signed me to write original fiction for her. So I will absolutely credit fandom as having had a lot to do with it. But, George R. R. Martin talks about how all of Game of Thrones is him writing the adventure he imagined for the tiny turtles he had in his bedroom, which, as a herpetologist, I have questions about. Like, how many of those turtles died, George? How bad were you at keeping turtles alive? Most of my books are just writing out the adventures My Little Ponies had when I was a kid. So
And if you twist them up, they just bounce right back. So no harm done.
exactly. You can't kill a My Little Pony unless you use a barbecue.
I never considered that. But I also never actively tried to hurt My Little Ponies. Are you still, so you're a collector? I just saw one when we were setting up, but do you have a lot of My Little Ponies?
They have their own room in my house. I think at last count, I have something on the order of 2,000 of them. I have all of the classic play sets. I just set up the Paradise Estate at Christmas. You know how when you're an adult and you encounter the things you played with as a kid, they're almost always smaller than you remember because your memory paints them as large? That did not happen with the Paradise Estate. It is bigger than I remembered it being. It is the size of an entire dining room table.
So you get paid in My Little Ponies. You're like, I'll write this book for you, but my advance is My Little Ponies.
I essentially do get paid in My Little Ponies. I mean, they give me money, but it then turns into cat food in My Little Pony.
Bob Collins would like to know what your favorite shows or books were for your fanfic.
I wrote an enormous quantity of Buffy the Vampire Slayer fic. I also did a lot of Veronica Mars. But prior to that, the real on-ramp to doing serious fanfic was ElfQuest, the comic book series. I wrote for an ElfQuest fanzine for approximately 6 years. And I say fanzine because this was when I was coming out of high school going into college. So this was the late 90s, early 2000s, and it was on paper. Like somebody printed that shit out. They went to Kinko's and they had it pressed. I still have physical artifacts in my closet of the ElfQuest fanzine. And that is really how I learned to be edited because like so many writers, I was the smartest kid in my English class. And that's not really bragging because we were all the smartest kid in our English class. We're now talking about thousands of smartest kids all kind of jockeying for position. And no one ever had time to edit us. We were done a disservice by the fact that we were the smartest kid. And so there was no need on the teacher's part to give us extra attention. It needed to go to the person that didn't know what they were saying. The fanzine, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I'm on ElfQuest still. Is it coincidental that you are a Northern Californian and Wendy and Richard Peeney are Northern Californians? Or was it just purely the subject matter? Because with Cutter and Skywise and all those, there were so many people we could want to dig into and be and feel. So I can see that. But the Peeneys are like in your hood practically. You're in Northern California, right? Or were?
I'm in Seattle. I was, yeah. Are they in Northern California?
Okay. They're from San Fran.
Yeah, no, I didn't know that either. Yeah, no, it was coincidence.
Okay.
It was coincidence, the subject matter, the fact that, again, look at the time periods under discussion. This is late 90s, early 2000s. The Peeneys actually admitted that girls did stuff.
Right.
Which a surprising amount of fanish properties just did not.
They're supposed to look like they did a lot of stuff. Leslie says, I never approached anything my children wanted to do as telling them it would be hard. So she agrees with that approach. And Bob Collins says, counting to 10 was my kindergarten achievement. I knew that S stood for Mr. Silly Snake. Love it.
Many snakes are very silly.
So at what point did you start writing your own material based on your own characters? Because you have like an incredibly rich array of characters. Every book introduces more from all different backgrounds. I mean, my kids have never related to characters in books the way they do to yours. They're so nuanced. They come from so many different, like all different types of, gender fluid types of things, with character that has obsessive compulsive disorder. It's like, there's just so much going on. And people can finally see themselves in a book. So when did you start writing your own characters and how do you find them?
I started writing my own characters in high school while I was doing all of the fanfic. And I was learning the lessons in fanfic because that was fiction I could show people and then taking them back and applying them to my original work. And as for finding the characters, I find them everywhere. There are people everywhere. I think that the most important thing fiction can do is show the world, Hadestown, it's a musical, and it says, we'll show you the world as it could be, not as it really is. And that's what fiction needs to do. It needs to show the optimal version of the world. And that is why I find it somewhat disturbing how many people's optimal version of the world is all white dudes.
Fair.
And maybe one woman. It's like, okay,
one really hot woman. Too.
One really hot woman who is a reward for the best of the white dudes. And it's like, y'all clearly don't like women much if you only want one of us, but you also don't like other white dudes much because only one of you is getting the woman.
That's a good point. Well, I think, deep down underneath, some of them just don't like girls, but they don't talk about it. Because in those kind of books, they don't talk about that sort of thing.
Yep.
Which is what I like so much about yours, because you do.
Thank you.
In your picking your topics and your themes, of course, I mean, starting with fanfic from places, My Little Pony, a lot of inclusiveness, a lot of, relationship based, you're welcome here. Everybody's here. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, give or take the new understanding of who Joss Whedon is, aside for a moment, just the fact that Joss was really one of the only ones writing amazingly strong female characters at that point for the pop culture. How much of this was you still having to carry those themes and torches for people? Like, how much of this is you saying, I need this because I need more women to know this stuff? How much is activism, I guess?
I mean, it's not even activism. It's a vast and outsized sense of responsibility toward my own inner child. I went to a lot of therapy as a kid. I'm from Northern California, as you say. We are the therapy generation. And I feel that I owe myself what I didn't get. So I am trying to fill that in. And just a huge amount of it is, well, when I was 12, this would have helped me hugely. I'm going to try and put it out there for the 12-year-olds that are kicking around today. Though I do have to note, you're saying My Little Pony and it's all relationship drama and stuff. You are very clearly someone who has mostly been exposed to Friendship is Magic. The original My Little Pony was not about relationship drama. The original My Little Pony was Gormenghast with hooves.
Oh, okay. So then let me ask you this question, because you're absolutely right. I skipped it as a kid because when I was a kid, if you liked My Little Pony and you were male, you're just asking for the fights. I mean,
Oh, I
might as
know.
well just stood in the arena. But my kids got into Friendship is Magic, and my kids, my oldest did at a later age. And then I knew a lot of fellas, in the brony world.
Mhm.
And I was just like, this is so weird. Like, the culture was so weird. I watched the
Bob Collins
documentary.
has a friend who's an executive producer and showrunner for My Little Pony.
Do you know
Awesome.
Michael Vogel? Bob will make the introduction if you want. But no, so there is a question in that pile. The question is, so the original, what was the thrust of that then? You started to
Okay.
answer.
So the very first episode of the original My Little Pony, the ponies fought Satan and they won. Like, My Little Pony was high fantasy. It was epic high fantasy, Gormengastian. There were stakes, people died, things were destroyed. It was supposed to be selling a toy line, and part of how they made sure you would buy the new ponies is they just killed the last batch off. It was not Bad Hair and Mean Girls. I kind of checked out of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic fairly early in because it had such a high focus on I was not the target audience, and I could tell I was not the target audience, and I didn't want to stay there and be grumpy if the target audience was happy. Most of my Friendship is Magic grumpiness is actually based around bronies because they were not the target audience either, but they came in and were so loud that they retooled the show to cater to the bronies. So the word for a female-oriented show, because cartoons are very gender binary, for a girl show that attracts a large male audience is retooled. The word for a boy show that attracts a large female audience is canceled. And that offends my sense of fairness.
I was thinking about the characters in your book. I get to see them in the Wayward Children series, which is what my kids and I are looking at now. And to us, it's like, yes, this is what we've always needed. Publishers didn't necessarily agree. So did you run into any kind of difficulty early on getting them to accept, that this array of people is out there? You'll still find people, like, you're on Twitter. I'm sure you find people who are like, whoa, there's not this many like trans people, or there's not this many. There are.
Yeah. Can you tell me without telling me that you have no queer friends? Yes, you can. Congratulations. So I am an extremely politically liberal person, but I am a personally conservative person in terms of what risks I take. I'm very careful and I measure things. So if you go back to my earliest work, I started publishing in 2009, which is simultaneously a long time ago and very, very recent for the amount of work I've put out. If you go back to my earliest work, it's much more traditional, straight up urban fantasy. Here you go. There's a man, there's a woman. Could I be any more obvious? And so I kind of honey trapped them. I Rick Riordaned them in a little less successful of a way, which is if you start with my earliest stuff, it looks like I'm just going to give you a feminist Dresden Files. It looks like I'm going to be very much, it's a girl, but she's writing the stuff you like from the boys. What? And then the longer you stick around, the more queer people and neuroatypical people and disabled people just keep showing up. We can't get rid of them.
That was a massive. So first off, great explanation. But what a bunch of like snuck in references that if one doesn't read in this genre deeply, they didn't catch. Rick Riordan, Dresden Files, Jim Butcher. Like that. That's not. I know your bookshelf without having seen your bookshelf.
If you think Rick Riordan is obscure, you are
No,
not
no, no,
paying
no, 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 no.
attention.
No,
Okay.
but they're also recasting his. They're actually already going to do a relaunch, which kind of is weird. But
Well, no, they're doing a television show. My friend Ashley is heavily involved. She's Rick Riordan's social media manager.
okay,
Um, she was really into the musical. She was part of the musical social media team. The Rick Riordan musical is one of my favorite shows of the last 10 years. Um, the movies were abysmally bad, and they were well over 13 years ago now. So the fact that they're moving on to a TV show when that original cast would have completely aged out, and when people have thankfully mostly forgotten those incredible abomination movies, is perfectly logical. I'm so happy for Uncle Rick. Good team.
so what I was my intention in that line of questioning was, you are a nerd of the highest order. Does it
Yes.
is it required to be a fan of your work? Can you read through without being that depth of nerd, or is it one of those I'm just going to get 1,000 Easter eggs a book? What's the difference?
Well, my mother reads my books, and she is not a nerd. We're not actually sure how she raised me. She is so little of a nerd. She can identify 2 X-Men. She
Which
knows who
two? Which two?
She knows who Wolverine is, and she knows who Emma Frost is, because Emma Frost is my favorite. And there's a great big Emma Frost poster above my desk. I have the first framed appearance of the White Queen above my desk so she can judge me in my workday. She knows who Jean Grey is by name, but that is about as far as it gets. And so if my mother can read and understand my books, you don't need to be a super nerd to read and understand them. Now, if you are a super nerd, you will find those Easter eggs. But if you don't recognize them, if they don't make sense, if they're not there, that's fine. That won't detract.
Can we talk about continuity in a long series? You've got these incredibly complex universes that you build. So the Wayward Children series, for those who haven't checked it out, but a door will open from our world into a completely other world with completely different rules, species, everything. How do you keep that straight from book to book?
Well, Wikipedia is an open source code, and a private wiki is really easy to set up, as it turns out. So I have about 20 different private wikis running on my computer at any given time, that contain all of the information I need to keep going. There are also fan run wikis that I admit, I will occasionally consult the fan run wikis if I'm in a hurry and don't have time to go through the 20 pounds of information I thought was important when I was writing that page. But part of it is also just, how do you keep track of who's on Grey's Anatomy versus who's on Chicago Med? If those are the stories you're really personally invested in, you're going to have an easy time remembering details about them.
Easier when you write business books, Chris.
Look, I'm way back at Wiki. That's impressive, but I know though, because I dug into Wikipedia yesterday for a detail that I didn't remember. So I get it. They're all out there, just like the truth. You were mentioning your variety of characters who wander in, and wait a little bit, and there'll be a queer person, person differently abled, and whatever that's probably not the right words anymore. How much of this comes from your interest in representing? How much of this fits the character building? Do those two things have to intersect?
Those things have to intersect or they won't be people. I can say all I want that I want to write a character that fits X or Y, but if they are not people in my head, I won't be able to write them well. So I tell my head what I want and then I wait for it to give it to me. And that can take a while sometimes, especially when you're talking about the long running series. At the beginning of a series, you have all the freedom in the world. You can create anything you want. But once you hit book 5 or something, it has to make sense. They have to be showing up for a reason. Your audience has to be willing to accept them. no one in the real world is anything for any reason other than that's who they are. And that is how it feeds into the character building for me. I say I need a character where this is an attribute that they have. And then when they show up, that will just be part of who they are. It's not really a negotiable thing. It's not, I don't sit down and go, okay, today is the day that I'm going to build the character who is X.
You wrote a piece of 50 thoughts for writers, and it's interesting to me that the people who happen to have a pretty good fan base tend to also have so many aspirant writers around them at all times. Stephen King's book on writing comes to mind when I think of some of what you covered in the 50 thoughts. How many of your readers are sort of there, but for the grace of Discord go I? Like how many more of them are just waiting for their chance to be Seanan?
I don't think any of them are waiting for their chance to be Seanan, which makes me very grateful because we don't need my friend Brooke tends to say that 2 of me would be way too many. We need at least 1, but 2 would be too many. Please, no more than that. So I don't think any of my readers are waiting for their chance to be me. I think some of them are waiting for their chance to be writers in their own right. And that is because we are attracted to the things that we want in this world. A huge number of readers will read, and you're absorbing that. You're pulling in the words all the time from all these different people. And sometimes you'll read things that are objectively bad. I have read books that made me sit there going, why aren't I published yet? Before I was published. So
some of the thoughts about writing that you mentioned are kind of distilling out insight from criticisms people heap on and learning to tell the difference between like a personal criticism or affront or just insult and actual valuable critiques. So how do you do that? And if is somebody who's just being a dick, do they ever actually have a point? Because I tend to just not listen to people like that.
I am, for someone who writes books in a male-dominated field, it is still male-dominated despite the recent steps forward, especially at things like the Hugo Awards, who used to do stand-up comedy, remarkably thin-skinned. I take criticism very seriously, and I have trouble tuning out the assholes. Now, I am also somewhat neurotic. I will beat anything that bothers me to death over the course of weeks or even months. And that means I tend to distill the criticism entirely on my own because you said a mean thing and then I spent 8 weeks trying to figure out what that mean thing meant. Does that mean thing have any actual relevance? Is that mean thing just you being an asshole, or is that mean thing actually applicable to my life? And at the end of it, if there was anything of use in that mean thing, I will have found it. If there was not, I will just have lost a lot of sleep because you were a dick.
Which of the characters in the Wayward Children series do you feel is the most like you?
Jack.
Jack Walcott. She's a twin, right? So that's like one thing. And the other kids in the school they go to call them the Addams twins because they are creepy.
They are deeply creepy. When I was a kid, my biggest aspiration was to marry Vincent Price. But I do have obsessive compulsive disorder. I was diagnosed when I was 9, so I have childhood onset, which is the same thing Jack has. And Jack has the closest manifestation to my form of OCD that I have ever written.
Is it wrong to ask the question, what kind is that? Like, is that seems it could be very personal, but I'm always fascinated by it because it is such, it's one of those disorders where people don't understand there's such a span. It's like when people hear Tourette's and they think basically you just swear all day.
Yeah, well, you can see my room behind me. You can see that mess does not bother me. I'm fine with clutter. I am a collector and I am obsessed with numbers. You can really upset me by throwing things off the numbers that they're supposed to be on. I form patterns very quickly. And so, there's that joke that canceling plans in terms of satisfaction is better than heroin. Not for me. Canceling plans causes massive panic attacks for me. So this glorious panorama in which we have been trapped since early 2000 has been super exciting because people make plans and then they cancel plans and then they make plans and then they cancel plans and then I have a panic attack in the back of the closet.
Which is where the rest of us are. So it's actually a very crowded closet.
It's a very crowded closet at this point, yeah.
But what I think was so interesting about what you're talking about, Jack, and OCD, and how other people fail to at times appreciate the impact it has on you and change has on you. In the books, there's whole other plots that occur or don't occur, because of Jack and what she can and can't tolerate. Like whole different, without spoiling anything, but things could go in a whole different direction. And people are like, why don't you just do this? Literally cannot.
Mm-hmm.
And people just don't understand it.
And that's part of why I wanted to write her that way, honestly, is that even people who love me sometimes will just be like, oh, you're being difficult. No, I'm not being, I mean, I am being difficult, but I'm not being difficult to be difficult. I'm being difficult because this is difficult.
So that's important then to show the nuance of that.
Mhm.
I imagine though, so it's, how do you do honor to that character then? And it's probably easier for you in that instance, right? But if it's somebody who's got not even a condition, but say somebody different from you and you're trying to write for them, how do you honor that and kind of dig in and get into the shoes of someone that you really don't understand inherently?
I make sure to talk to as many people as I possibly can for whom that is their lived experience. For whom that is not just an interesting character trait, that's part of who they are. That's a thing that they have every day going on for them. I get sensitivity readers, which are people who will read the book over when it's done and tell me if I have stumbled into any really bad tropes or bad associations that I, as a person who do not live that, would not necessarily have seen coming. And I listen as much as I can to people for whom, again, that is their life.
Sensitivity readers is just a phrase I just heard for the first time just now. And I'm thinking, boy, my life would be different if I had sensitivity readers. They would just have to follow me around in my day-to-day as well. Because I don't say, there's a line and then there's me.
You would be a terrible sensitivity reader. Your dad says, my odometer is a large source of comfort for me. I'm saddened when I miss a pattern that occurs.
10101, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And he used to send me photos of the patterns on the odometer. Nerd out on him a bit. So
my younger son, when we would drive it, and I want to say they were like 18 months or 2, would say every time we went by this one house, 12111, and we just thought it was Babel, and then we realized it's the same Babel. He was reading the numbers on the mailbox. 12111 was the numbers, and that was how I figured out he could read at that age. That child's favorite character is Sumi. So if you need any insight into how my life with them goes, that's how it goes. So check out the Wayward Children series. It is amazing if you haven't. Do you have a favorite series? I mean, this is just where I'm starting. So that's clearly what I'm into now. But are you allowed to have a favorite as an author? Or do you have to love them all equally for different reasons?
I mean, my favorite is whatever I'm working on right now. So right now, InCryptid is my favorite series because I am currently writing the 2023 InCryptid book. And then this year's InCryptid comes out next month, which is called Spelunking Through Hell. And I just like saying that, spelunking. It's such a good word.
It's very descriptive. Like you can picture what spelunking looks like.
I have one last question before I'm ready to let you go, which is you had an early career in stand-up and then you switched over and did books. What's the difference? What's the difference to you? I mean, there's so many more dynamics to having to be in a room with people in front of a stage with a mic and all that compared to getting a joke to land on paper. What's that feel like to you?
I mean, again, prior to the current situation, I did a lot of conventions. I traveled a lot. I still do a huge amount of public speaking. I did the National Book Festival in DC. One of the most popular panels I do is called In Conversation with Seanan McGuire. And it's basically an evening with Kevin Smith with more tits and more swearing. I will answer any question I am asked for the duration of the panel. And I will answer it honestly, and I will answer it appropriately, which means that what I will answer may or may not actually be the question you asked. I had someone show up for one of these things thinking he was being very clever and say, "Oh, you say you'll answer any question? Well, how many yeast infections have you had?" And what he received was not a number, it was a 10-minute lecture on systemic misogyny, that sort of thing. So I do actually still use that particular skill set. Zoom has been really difficult for me because I can't read the room. I need the micro expressions and the ways that people's postures shift. I can't tell if you're uncomfortable from a tiny little picture on a screen. But moving to books, I have to accept that my audience is going to vary a lot. I can't control who's in the room that is picking up and reading the book. Whereas at a comedy club, I could look out over the audience and go, okay, this is an audience of mostly looks like straight people. I'm going to make straight people jokes. Mostly looks like queer people. I'm going to make queer people jokes. I am right next to a cat show. I'm going to make cat show jokes, whatever. And I stopped doing stand-up comedy as much because my last big show, my last open production show, I was headlining at a small comedy club in San Francisco after my books had started coming out. And some readers of my books saw my name on the marquee and decided that they were going to come and see me do stand-up comedy. And I worked real blue. Like Bob Saget was one of my instructors when I was a teenager. I was heartbroken when he passed earlier this year. I haven't spoken to the man since I was 15, but he still was one of my teachers, and it was painful. For those of you who don't know, who might be listening and just like, what does that mean? Blue is filthy. Kind of. If you go to see a blue comedian, you know that you're going to hear some swears and probably hear some references to body parts, and the swears and the body parts may be in the same place, and they may do the aristocrats. You don't know. But it's a great big NC-17 content warning is what it is. And so they came to my show, and stand-up comedy, I was a bit comedian. You learn bits. You have stories that are kind of pre-canned, and you do those in the order that fits. And one of my bits at that time was the international beep line, which was about a word that is the worst word you can possibly say in North America, but is actually not that bad a word in Australia or Ireland or Scotland. I had a jump rope. I would be jump roping and calling out what country I was in. I said that word something like 117 times over the course of the bit. I had another routine is called menstruation falls. And like Weight Watchers is Disneyland for people with OCD about the counting and all of that. And it was intentionally very graphic and somewhat offensive material that was being performed by a blue comedian in a show with other blue comedians. So I thought I was fine. And then after the show, which was very successful, I was very happy. I went to get myself a drink, and I met my readers, and they were traumatized. And I realized that if I wanted to have a career in writing, I needed to pull back on that comedy. And I'm really grateful that I did, because again, this was 2009. And the world has changed a bit since 2009. You can't really find much of my stand-up on the internet because it was not as standard that everyone had a little video camera in their pockets all the time and everything got filmed and put on YouTube. And I don't think I would be doing as well as a writer if I'd kept doing comedy, not because I am ashamed of my comedy, but because taken out of context, some of my comedy was very comedy. I was good. I was lucky. I didn't punch down. But
You funny about Bob Saget though, because he of course ran into the same scenario. He's on these beloved kids shows, and the people who go to see his stand-up, and he said, he goes, I can almost always tell. I can almost always tell they walk into the audience, they have a very different face on than everybody else in the audience. And I have to say, you should probably go. You should really just turn right around. You're not going to like this. And then sometimes they'd bring their kids, and he's like, doubly, like, get out. Well,
this is not the Danny Tanner Adventure Hour.
Most definitely not. Well, we rushed somehow. We time traveled. There's a little TARDIS problem, but we are here at the end of the show a lot faster than we want it to be. So we have to do a couple things.
Oh, and here's our person of the day. Kaboom!
I would have to say maybe by sheer volume, but just from pure participation stakes, our man Robert Collins gets it today.
Woo!
Robert had a lot going on. So you are now entitled to a free apple, Robert. You just have to go to a store, buy an apple.
Wash it really good, and then bake it into a tartlet. That would be my advice.
A tartlet would be great. I thought a tartlet was just a much smaller tart.
Shows what you know. Which is weird because you love small tarts.
I do love small tarts, dear Lord. All right, so now we're at the part of the show where we've asked every single guest the same question. Everybody from Sir Mix-a-Lot to Butterscotch, the beatbox champion 5 times over. What goes in your backpack? This could be something physical, like an avocado. It could be something metaphorical, like hope for the future. Kerry, what's a good physical example of something that goes in a backpack?
Yeah, don't put an avocado in your backpack.
A book you hate, because eventually you if it's the only book you've got to hand, you'll learn something from it. That was Whiskey Nate's advice.
Mm-hmm.
Aw.
How about something you could add that's metaphorical?
Kindness.
Mm.
That was Ariel Helvetica, burlesque performer.
So now, Seanan McGuire, what would you add to the backpack?
My backpack generally contains my Franklin Covey planner, which I've been carrying since I was 16. It is a brick. I still planner on paper because it helps my sanity. A set of dice, because dice are the single best writing tool I have ever found. And a copy of the Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook, because if I have dice, I may as well be ready for D&D.
What's your go-to character? I have to know now.
I play mostly tieflings these days. I really enjoy them because they come in bright colors. They are My Little Pony people. And I am a pure arcanist player. I play wizards, sorcerers, and warlocks. Right now, I'm mostly enjoying sorcerers because I finally got the hang of sorcery points in 5e. Though I do like that warlocks get all their spells back after a short rest.
I like the answer.
The dice in your backpack because you're a writer. Why are you like, does she live or die?
You know, I have actually done that when I had a choice between 2 characters and one of them had to die and I couldn't make up my mind. I have flipped a coin or rolled a die. And no one wants to hear that if the one I killed was their favorite. But I use dice throughout the day to keep track of where I am with my word count. I will lay out a number of dice equivalent to the number of 1,000 words I need to run and then just integrate them through the day. And having a physical reminder when you are really thinking about a virtual space, because the words go into a virtual space, having that physical reminder makes it much easier to motivate myself to actually finish. And you can't close your laptop while there are dice on the keyboard.
That's an extra bonus thing to know. That's worth the whole show. Wow. Well, you know, Seanan, I was thinking about the fact that, you know, you have so many different facets to you. There's so much to learn. There's so many things to pick up. I was trying to think about, you know, which of your books would have been perfect for my grandmother. And she was a reader. She was very much into soap operas as well, though. And I thought, well, that's not exactly a piece of your writing. What I think she might have dug, what the book I think she would have picked from your series would be...
She'd have been into the Buffy fanfic.